Welcome to the Timeless Wealth Podcast, where we have conversations concerning mindset, generational wealth, finance, and business. On today's episode, we'll be talking about inflation and why you've been hearing it as a hot topic in the news. But before, let's get into some general housekeeping. First of all, leave that 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening on. 2, follow us on all our social media. It can be found down below on the link tree. 3, make sure to go check out our website. I'll be beefing it up shortly, but it's just a good place to go look around. But now, back to the topic. I'm just going to jump right into it this week. Y'all know the drill. Go back, listen to the last few episodes. Y'all want a long housekeeping spill. But in general, we're talking about inflation on this particular podcast episode. And when I think of inflation, I think of those two Nene memes. Y'all know Nene off, what's that show? The Real Housewives of Atlanta. I think about that meme where we bring our own drinks up into places like this, because that's what inflation would make you do. It would make like that simple $50 bottle of Hennessy in the club be worth $250, $500. And you basically got to bring your own drink up pregame before you go. But that's what I think about inflation. It's just a side thought. Another meme I think about is from Nene is what is this, honey? Y'all know that one? I think she's walking into, is it Kenya? I think she's walking into her apartment. She was like, what is this, honey? I think that's the right meme. But anyway, that's how I was feeling at Publix a few weeks ago. I was trying to buy some bacon, and I was like $12-13 for some bacon. Like, I wanted to speak, but I'm gonna buy it anyway, because if I want some bacon, I'm gonna get it. I know I shouldn't be eating pork, told on myself, but if I want it, I'm gonna go buy it no matter whatever the price is. But still, like, paying that much for bacon, I should be paying $7 for bacon. But anyway, that's what inflation does. It sneaks up on you. It's a general progression of price increase. I've also noticed this around pumping gas. So I drive a Mercedes, and we had to get that premium gas to fill up our cars. And I feel like I'm paying California prices in the Southeast for gas, because I'm paying like right around $4, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more than $4 in premium to fill up my tank. And it's just, I don't like it. It's quite ghetto, inflation. But even though inflation is ghetto, as I call it, but it's actually kind of needed, but not at these kind of hyperinflation levels that we have it now. And we'll discuss a little bit that a little later on. But before we get into all the fun stuff dealing with inflation and what we're hearing in the news, let's get into the definition on what is inflation. Inflation is the decline of purchasing power of a given currency over time. In other words, it is a general progression of prices of goods and services in a country. So basically, what those last two definitions said is that it's generally the increase of goods and service, the worth of them. Not really the worth, but the pricing you use to go buy them. So let's say if a pack of gum is $1 this year, and then next year it's $1.50, you would say it went through inflation. Because it's the same pack of gum, but just what you need, the amount of currency you need has went up to go buy that same good or service. You're probably like, how do they measure inflation? Like, how are we tracking this? So you have the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. They have this index they make. It's called the Consumer Price Index. And it's a measure of the average change over time in the prices paid by urban consumers for a market basket of consumer goods and services. Indexes are available for the U.S. in various geographic areas. Average price data for select utility, automotive, food, and food items are also available. So I got that definition right off their website. Feel free to type in U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and CPI index to go on and see what's going on with it. But basically what the CPI index is, it just kind of tracks inflation, and it does that by category. Over the last year, we've seen about 7.5% over year end ended January 2022 of the general consumer prices going up. What that means is, let's say if you're paying $1 for a good in beginning of 2021, that means that in the beginning of 2022 you would pay $1.08 for that same amount of good. Certain areas the prices have went up a lot higher than others. We tend to think food has went up the highest, but actually no. Because I feel like down in my spirit, I feel like food has went up the highest. Because I feel like my grocery bill before like coronavirus threw off everything. But I feel like my grocery bill was maybe $60 to $80 a month. Not a month, a week. But like still, I don't think I was buying groceries like that because I was traveling every week for work. So, yeah, but for some reason I think I was paying $60 to $80 for everything. But now it feels like each time I walk into Publix, 130, 140, 150, it just be something like it don't be costly, but it's just you do know is a difference of pricing, and part of that could be to where I shop at too. Because I ain't gonna lie, back in college I was shopping at the Walmart a lot. Then I would go into Publix for like produce, but now I'm a one-stop shop person. I'm gonna go to Publix, and I may go over to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, but 95% of what I'm gonna get is gonna come right out of Publix. But I've noticed food go up, and you all probably have. But actually, food is not where we saw the highest percent increase. Is actually dealing with fuel. So we've definitely seen that go up in the last year. So if you feel like you're paying more for gas, you probably are. Me, I don't feel like I'm paying more for gas. I feel like I'm paying more for a mile per gallon, when you go fill up your tank. Because the gas prices are high. But I don't do as much commuting no more. I work from home like many other people do. But if you're still commuting a lot, you probably definitely notice the gas prices going up. And then also, used cars and trucks stick out to me too on this list. And I kind of noticed this too is because I was looking at the value of my car. Because, I'm always just looking at stuff. And I'm like, I can really sell it for more than what I really paid for it, and it depreciated already. But I just thought that was interesting. I need to do a little bit more research into why that is so. But feel free to go onto the CPI site on the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. They have all these different categories. They break up inflation by. And you can kind of see which kind of these categories went up higher than others. So it's good to see, because if you spend a lot more in the areas where the percent increases were a lot higher, you probably are noticing inflation a lot more than others. But now let's get into what causes inflation. There's many different things. I'm not going to go into detail because this is Inflation 101. If I was going to go into details about Federal Reserve policy and stuff, that would probably be a 201, 301 course, and that stuff can get real complex fast. I know because I was a finance major in college. But these are the main things that cause inflation. The government printing more money. The second thing is they call it cost push inflation, which that's basically where the cost rises to operate a business, and then just so that business can make more even to have the same amount of profit margin, they have to increase those prices of their goods and services. An example of this is, let's say if you're opening up, let's see something. Let's say you're just selling cookies, right? And you got like 2 or 3 employees, and y'all selling cookies to grocery stores and all that. You got a brand going on, and you're selling cookies, but all of a sudden you notice that the grocery prices are jumped up. And that's one of your main inputs, because you need the milk, you need the chocolate chips, you need all the other things that go into the cookies. And then you also you want to use kind of good labor practices. You just don't want to pay your employees bare minimum. So you see that everything else around in your area is increasing in cost value. So what you're going to do is you're going to eventually increase your prices to cover the increase in the cost of all your inputs to make cookies, and B, to kind of make sure your employees have a decent not a decent state, but a decent pay rate to where they're not going to be going out looking for a job somewhere else because you're underpaying them and it's not matching the inflation rate. And I'm going to make that make a little bit more sense later on, but that's a reason that inflation happens. And then another reason is that a number of people who want a good or service increases, and the supply is not increasing at the same time. And we know by economics, that's going to intrinsically increase the price. But I'm not going to bore you with economics because, to be honest, economics was boring to me in college. But we might make an inflation 102 course or 201 course, really, and get a little bit more detail on why these things exist. But in general, also, I almost forgot this one. The Federal Reserve has a significant input into inflation because they try to keep it in certain ranges, because if it gets out of whack, it can throw off the whole economy. And you know, it's the U.S. If it throws off us, it's going to throw off the whole world, and it's just going to be a mess. But they do some policy kind of plays to kind of influence inflation to be in a certain range. And this kind of gets into the next question: is all inflation bad? I know I complain about inflation, but we want inflation. The reason why I say we want inflation is because that means our incomes are going to increase more. And then if you look at the counter opposite of it, deflation, you might be like, okay, maybe inflation is bad. Let's look into deflation. Deflation is basically the exact opposite of inflation. So if deflation was to occur, that means our wages are going to get cut. And you just don't want that. It's a whole lot of other things that go into with deflation, but that kind of mimics that a recession or depression is imminent or already here. So you don't typically want deflation, but you do want inflation, but you want it typically in the 2 to 3% range. You don't want it at 7.5% what it is today, which is just too high. It's really hyperinflation, borderline hyper. It's more than borderline hyperinflation. I was trying to be nice, but yeah. So I read Wall Street Journal sometimes. I try to read it every morning, but I typically don't get around to it all the time. But this article has stuck out to me. If you have Wall Street Journal, you could go onto there and read the full article. If you don't, you might can get a trial version, or you might can read like a certain part of it. But this article is titled "Inflation Was Hottest in Atlanta, Mildest in San Francisco in 2021." This is kind of getting into how does inflation affect me. Inflation is not the same in all places of the country. So if you're in an area that's growing really fast, like Atlanta, for example, it's millions upon millions of people moving to Atlanta. You're going to see it more than if you're in somewhere like the Corn Belt or the Rust Belt. You might even be seeing some deflation out there. I don't know what they got going on out there. But I'm going to read you one excerpt from this article. It's actually the first sentence. Consumer prices rose faster last year in large U.S. metropolitan areas, seeing an influx of new residents than in the nation overall, while inflation was milder in larger coastal cities with less population growth. The Atlanta, Sandy Springs, Roswell area saw the highest inflation among metropolitan areas with more than 2.5 million people, 9.8% for the 12 months through December, according to the Labor Department. Phoenix, St. Louis, and Tampa also saw annual inflation rates higher than the 7% national rate in December. So basically, that's going into support to what I said. It kind of depends on where the area you are living in and how inflation is directly going to affect you. So if you know you're moving to a city that's growing really fast, typically in the Sun Belt cities. The Sun Belt cities are typically your deep south growing cities. And I think they even include like Phoenix and places out there, Arizona. I think they include that in the Sun Belt, but I know for sure the Deep South is in the Sun Belt. So if you're moving to a bigger city there, you're going to be paying some more money, and you're going to be seeing a lot of inflation to come, because quite naturally, as more people crowd into a spot, the supply of land and resources stay the same or sometimes even go down, but the demand is higher, and that always causes the price value to intrinsically go up. So feel free to look at that article too. It's on Wall Street Journal, and again, it's called "Inflation Was Hottest in Atlanta, Mildest in San Francisco in 2021." It's actually a good read. It's good always to kind of stay current on what's happening around you. I stay in the Deep South, so I know my bias is kind of skewed. I like to talk about the Carolinas and Atlanta, because that's where I kind of spend the most time, and the areas closest to me. But I'm pretty sure on other ends of the country, they are seeing the exact same things happening. And then just going back to that question, how would inflation affect me? First of all, you see the overall price increase. Second of all, it kind of depends on your location, like we just discussed. And thirdly of all, you'll have the increase in purchasing power if your wages don't increase to match that pricing increase. So I'll get a little bit more into that in a second. But you're probably are like, how do we combat inflation in our micro settings and just our lives? Because I don't like throwing out all these problems and like, how's inflation negative affecting us if I'm not providing any solutions, because that doesn't fix the problem. First, I think the first thing is to be in the know. You don't have to become an inflation expert to figuring out what the Federal Reserve is doing every day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you should at least be in the know to say, okay, at least in my area, this is how much inflation went up over the year. And this is why you want to be in the know. You want to be in the know of that inflation rate in your area, so you're able to make income adjustments. So let's say if inflation rate is 7% from last year to this year, and you were making $100K at your job last year. So you will need to at least get a raise to about $107,000 to have the same amount of purchasing power. So you need to be in the know. And then let's say if you're in Atlanta, for example, in this article, Wall Street Journal article, it says 9.8%. So, if you're making $100K in Atlanta last year, you need to be making around $109,800 to have the same amount of purchasing power. And this is important to know if you're a wage earner or employee, because you need to make sure that your job is, when you have your merit increases and when you have just, the cost of living increases, you need to make sure it's matching that, because if not, this is going to accumulate in 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years down the road. You're going to feel like, I was affording this area, but now I'm not affording it and I'm struggling. It's because your job wasn't matching those cost of living increases, and you should have been getting new jobs that match that. And then this doesn't just apply to the job workers and wage earners. This also applies to the entrepreneurs and business owners. So let's say if you're charging $100,000 for a service, you need to be charging $107,000 for that same service if the inflation rate is 7%. To be honest, you need to charge a little bit more. But you get what I'm saying. You need to be in the know of the inflation rate in your area. And you also need to take that into account when you get your promotions, when you get your regular increases for being at a job for a certain amount of time. Typically that comes like once a year after your annual review if you're in a corporate or tech setting. Just make sure you're in the know, because you don't want to not get your you don't want the area that you work so hard to be in, and then in a few years, because you wasn't keeping mind of inflation and effects on you, and you're pushed out of that area. And then back to the original questions, how do I combat inflation? This is my last response here. Invest rather than have excess saving. This is going to be a whole nother episode in the future. It's going to be called investing versus saving. But I'm not telling you all to not have no savings. I'm not telling you all not to have no savings. I don't want nobody to come for me and say, I didn't took all my savings, invested it, and you done made a bad investment decision, you ain't got no money no more. But I'm saying with this statement is, once you got your emergency fund and your discretionary fund and any other thing you're saving for, like a down payment for a house, a car, or any other asset, all your other money should be invested. Because I can about 99.9% bet you that the interest rate you're receiving in your savings account for holding that lump sum of money is not going to beat the inflation rate. So let's say on that 100K, if you had 100K in the bank account, they may pay you $10 or $20 off of that in interest for the whole year. But if you would invest that money, you would have kind of beat inflation out, and you would have still had the same amount of purchasing power. So just keep in mind that this is why saving large amounts of cash is kind of a bad thing, because we've all seen in our lifetimes. I remember when I was younger, before I was driving, I think gas was like $1 or something. So if you would have still had that same amount in your bank account now, you would have been able, you're not going to be able to buy the same amount of gas than you was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So keep that in mind with inflation. But let me know your thoughts on inflation. And if you're interested in inflation 201 or 301, I can easily do that, where I can get into more detail about the Federal Reserve and how they try to affect inflation. Now, I could also get into more detail on inflation in particular areas, because like I said, every area, inflation is a little bit different. My bias, like I said, is kind of skewed. I'm in the Southeast. We're one of the fastest growing regions in the country. More people are moving here, so definitely everything's going to start costing more. But if you're in a different area, I could look in that too, for like a 201 or a 301. So, so thank you for listening. Feel free to give us that 5-star review. And then in addition, go over to our website and get onto our mailing list. So thank you all for listening.